Imagine living for 7 years in a space so small you can't stand up. The ceiling presses against your back. In summer, the heat feels like a furnace. In winter, frost bites through the boards. Through a tiny peephole, you watch your children playing in the yard below, close enough to hear them laugh but too dangerous to hold them. This is the story of Harriet Jacobs. Harriet Jacobs was born enslaved in Edenton, North Carolina in 1813. Like many children in bondage, she didn't realize she was enslaved until she was 6. Her early years were not defined by chains and auctions, but by something more insidious, the constant threat to her body and her dignity. When her first kind mistress died, Harriet was willed to a new household. There, a physician, whom she later called Dr. Flint in her book, began years of relentless harassment and abuse. Harriet's narrative is one of the first to say plainly what many enslaved women endured: the weaponization of sexual power. She writes later that slavery is terrible for men, but far worse for women. Under Dr. Flint's control, she faced coercion disguised as protection, stalking masked as concern, promises poisoned with threats. He vowed to build her a house if she would submit. He vowed to break her if she would not. Harriet refused to be broken. She made a choice that shocked her community but kept her agency. She entered a relationship with a white lawyer, Samuel Sawyer, hoping it would shield her from Flint. She bore 2 children, Joseph and Louisa. It didn't give her safety, but it gave her a new resolve. Every plan she made now had 2 goals: survive and keep her children out of the auction block's shadow. When Dr. Flint threatened to send her to a remote plantation, Harriet vanished. She didn't run to the north, at least not yet. Instead, she hid in the one place he'd never think to search, her grandmother's house. Not in a room, not in a cellar. In the attic crawl space above the porch, what she called her garret. It was roughly 9 feet long, 7 feet wide, and only 3 feet high at its peak. Harriet could not stand. She could barely sit. She carved a tiny hole into the wood to breathe and to watch her children below. For 7 years, she listened to the rhythms of their days, their games, their lessons, their arguments, while Dr. Flint continued to hunt for her. He even sent her children to coax her out. They didn't know she was just above them, fighting for her life, waiting for the right moment. The garret became a crucible. Heat blistered her skin, cold stiffened her limbs. Rats and insects scuttled in the dark. But this was where Harriet reforged herself. She read, she wrote, she planned. She endured because every day in that space brought her children closer to a future she could steer. At last, in 1842, her chance came. With help from allies, black and white, Harriet slipped from Edenton to the port city of Philadelphia, then on to New York. Freedom in the North was fragile. The fugitive slave laws kept danger close, and slave catchers had long reach. Harriet found work as a nursemaid in the household of the writer Nathaniel Parker Willis. Even there she was not legally safe. In 1852, her employer's wife purchased Harriet's freedom to protect her, a gesture that Harriet greeted with both relief and humiliation. Freedom bought was still a reminder of freedom stolen. By this time, Harriet had begun shaping her life into a story the country needed to hear. She had approached Harriet Beecher Stowe for help, but decided to tell the story in her own voice, on her own terms. With guidance from the abolitionist editor Lydia Maria Child, she wrote a book under a pen name, Linda Brent. In 1861, on the eve of the Civil War, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl was published. It is one of the most important American books of the 19th century. Where other narratives emphasized whips, chains, and daring escapes, Harriet centered a different battlefield: the home, the body, the fear that seeped into every corner of a woman's life under slavery. She wrote of hiding in the garret, of the calculated choices she made to outmaneuver her predator, of the moral double standards that judged enslaved women but excused enslavers. She named the hypocrisy of a society that preached purity while profiting from violation. Some doubted the book at the time. Its frankness shocked readers. But people who knew Harriet vouched for her, and modern scholarship has traced the names behind her pseudonyms, verifying her account. Today we recognize it as the first full-length slave narrative written by a woman that foregrounds sexual violence and resistance. It is a foundational text for understanding both American slavery and the history of women's rights. When the Civil War erupted, Harriet didn't retreat into her own story. She stepped forward. She and her daughter Louisa worked in abolitionist relief, aiding refugees from slavery, families crowding into contraband camps, hungry, sick and unsure what freedom meant in practice. Harriet helped organize schools and supplies, pushing to transform freedom from a legal word into a lived reality. After the war, she continued her advocacy, dividing her time between the United States and England and settling later in Washington, D.C. She remained committed to education and welfare for formerly enslaved people. Harriet Jacobs died in 1897, but the garret never left her. In her book, she writes about the day she finally stood on free soil and how strange it felt to straighten her back after so long bent double. That image of a woman unfolding herself to full height captures not just her life, but the hope she carried for others. Why does Harriet Jacobs matter today? Because her story makes a simple, urgent claim. Freedom is more than escape. It is safety. It is dignity. It is the right to decide what happens to your own body, your children, and your future. Her 7 years in the attic were not 7 years of silence. They were 7 years of choosing to survive, to strategize, and to tell the truth so the nation would have to listen. If you read Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl now, you'll hear a voice that is intimate, unsparing, and modern. You'll find not just the horror of slavery, but the intelligence of a woman who refused to be reduced to that horror. You'll find a mother who counted each risk by her children's faces, and you'll find a writer who understood that the smallest spaces, the width of a floorboard, the circle of a peephole, can open into the widest questions about justice. Harriet once wrote, "I was born a slave, but I never knew it till 6 years of happy childhood had passed away." The rest of her life was a journey back to that first knowledge, back to the truth that she was a person, not property. She reclaimed that truth inch by inch, year by year, until she could stand in the light and claim it for everyone. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who hasn't heard of Harriet Jacobs. Your support helps bring more hidden histories to light.